Okay, Rachel, whenever you're ready.
Hey, everybody, we're recording, so make sure you behave. Like, I don't know, like don't send any crazy screens or anything. I don't know, no photobombing or all that good stuff. I'm Rachael Gomez. I am the State Theatrical Design Contest Director, and this is part 2 of our session today. For those of you who are just joining us, we in the last session we did the big reveal of this year's prompt assignments, like for what students would be asked to do for this year's play. And we're going to be going into that in a little bit more depth. I really wanted to kind of talk to you guys this particular session about being able to look at some different resources and things that have come into our being over this past year with COVID kinds of things going on. We've actually been able to amass a pretty good collection of video resources, which was always my goal from the very first time I started working on this in this position. I always wanted us to be able to have like this fabulous selection of resources available from the league for teachers to be able to take into their classrooms and use, something to teach teachers how to get their heads around this contest for themselves, but also some really cool things that they could do, materials that they could use to introduce things to their students. And because we've been forced to do Zoom so much over the past year and a half, we've kind of amassed a good collection of some recordings from different presenters and things. And I wanted to especially talk to you this particular time about some of the ones that we put together during the state meet. What we were able to do with those students who made it to state. So if you're hearing about all this for the first time today, the students who made it to state this past year, everything was still digital. And so they had to submit, but we still wanted to have that interaction or that feedback between our incredible judges and the students whose work they had evaluated. And the only way that we could come up with to do it was for them to have kind of a private masterclass where we would put the judge on as a Zoom instructor, add all the students in as members of the masterclass for the person that had judged them so that they could communicate with one another, ask questions, and hear some of the thoughts from the adjudicators. And I will say, just the wealth of knowledge that our judges shared during those sessions was absolutely incredible. And we were actually able to have some judges this past year. You know, I'm always looking for silver linings. Yes, we had a digital contest, but guess what? We were able to afford to have judges come from New York City, working professionals able to judge and communicate with our students, or professors from universities. We had Charla here from Evansville and able to work with and talk to our students that we probably would not have been able to have flown in and had those moments with our students. But because of Zoom, we were able to. And we did record those sessions. Yes, they were specifically for the state participants and they got to experience all of that live and first, but we recorded it to make sure that those things were available for you guys to be able to have for resources to share with your students or for you to watch as a teacher to get some ideas in some of these different categories. Because I think they just had some incredible input over this past year. Maybe some of the things that we actually kind of changed and implemented in the prompt that you kind of saw in this past session, some of those things kind of came from ideas and things that we got from talking to our judges. So I want to make sure that you're aware that those exist. If you've never accessed it on the UIL theatrical design page or actually on the UIL website, there's a resources section from any of our conferences. I need to double check and ask Paula at some point where exactly our videos from state are posted so that you guys can have access to them. But I know if you do a search on the UI website, it will get you to them. And I specifically, one of my favorite ones, and I think it's kind of funny, but it was I believe it was, I don't remember if they did our Division 1 or our Division 2. It was our Division 2 costume session. It was with, we had 2 judges that worked on that work together, and their session with the students and them talking about design. I almost think that that moment in itself is a great thing to show your students, just to see professionals working with such a positive attitude and outlook, encouragement, exciting, engaging to listen to, not like a lecture like me telling them a bunch of rules and things about the contest, but an engaging conversation about design. I really encourage you, if you get a chance to show that to your students, because they were just phenomenal. They really had a great rapport with one another and with the kids, and it was a lot of fun. But the wealth of information that came out of those, both of our marketing sessions particularly had a lot of good things that honestly, I feel like as a one-act play director, if I were working on this contest, it's like, okay, sometimes I feel like, oh, doing the theatrical design contest, that's another thing on my plate. I've got to, add to all the hard work I have to do. But I would say, like, as a one-act play director, hearing those directors talk about marketing, I was so engaged. Like, if I was a director, I'd be like, well, I want to do those things to market the plays I'm doing right now, to make sure that the word is getting out, and some of the suggestions and things that they're talking about and ideas that they had, you can use those in other applications, as well as have your students listen to them, be engaged in them. You're going to be growing your program in ways by participating in this contest. You're going to be growing everything that you do better for having experienced it. And some of these professional resources, they're absolutely amazing. One of them was going into Kevin Rigdon's studio and seeing how he works with his set designs and his toys, and having an opportunity to hear somebody, like, who's kind of legendary like him, just kind of mull over kind of how he works things. Super, super neat for the kids to be able to have access to those. We had a professional makeup, our makeup judge, if you get a chance, she's also really, really inspiring. Our makeup judge this past year is a former makeup champion. She started with UIL contest. She was a state champion, and she's now working professionally in New York as a designer. And she's worked on a lot of different productions and things like that. So she's bringing that experience, but she's also bringing that love and that sense of being a high school kid who didn't know what she had in store for her, like, knew that she was kind of good at some certain things, and some encouragement in a contest put her in contact with something that she found out was going to be the next great thing in her life, that was going to carry her into a career. And so she has a fabulous story to tell, as well as extra information to teach kids about hair and makeup design as well, and the feedback and those kind of things. Super, super neat to hear. And we also had another costume designer, the one who did the Division I costume. He's a professional in New York as well, had some great information on swatches and things like that, things that we've struggled with in this contest. Here are professionals answering those questions, professional, not just having to hear it from same old teachers every year, but some from a working professional. Like, dude, he knows what he's talking about. He works on Broadway, so it's like you get that extra credibility of hearing professionals and having those videos easily accessible for a day that you just need to show something. I mean, I think that's awesome to have. So I really wanted to make sure that you guys were aware that that stuff was there, that it's being made available to you, as well as our sessions today, if you need to look back and hear different things. Obviously, the prompt will be posted. It's not yet. It was only in our video last session. I'll be bringing it back up so we can talk through and work through some different things with it. But I hope that we're improving the kinds of things that are available to you. And if you have ideas for those kinds of things, or if you've got stuff that works for you that you're willing to share with others, we're just always looking for ways to make this contest serve ourselves and our students better, and to make our contest something that's I don't know, even that much stronger and out in the world, and having the kind of context that it does to help our students who want to pursue this have an even stronger footing, leaving our competition. So I just throw that out there for you guys. When we talked about this session, it's kind of like finding the clues. It's like there's a lot of different ways. Right now, I think we needed some new resources. We needed some new places to look for things, and maybe having to go into Zoom kinds of things or different kinds of outlets to find information. Maybe we're going to be renewed by all of it and see some exciting stuff this year. So that being said, I wanted to go back and a little bit more in depth in the prompts. If you didn't see it this past time, let me see. I think I'm going to share screen. I'll bring it back up here. I'm just going to share the screen with the prompt itself. Let me see what that looks like, if I can do that. I think it's this one. Let's see if this does it. Okay, yeah, I'm just going back through our prompt as we have it here, just so you guys can see it. It will be posted on the webpage. I like to give credit to my daughter. She just learned how to do Procreate this past month, and she got out her iPad and she made a poster for me, and I love it because I didn't have to do it. I just got to tell her, I like these colors. I kind of like a train coming straight on, and I saw some cool ones with like red smoke that I thought were kind of cool, different things, but there's a lot of amazing graphics and stuff out there. She, being a wonderful daughter that she is, did this for me, and I think it turned out pretty neat, and she's learning how to use Procreate, which I think is super exciting. But that is, in fact, the name of the show we're doing. Just to quickly go back over the directorial prompt, for those of you who have not heard, the big, huge news this year is we're doing a play where you can't change the time and the place. Our contest has been long called that thing where you take a play and you completely rearrange it to another time and place every year. Is like, that's the myth is shattered this year, because we're not going to do it. We're going to actually do something historically accurate. And that's what it explains here in this particular directorial prompt. No twist, it's just real. We want it to be, we want it to take place during that time. One of the things I'll encourage you to look into with your students with regards to realism is that there's different kinds of realism. Just because we are setting it in the time and place as prescribed, there are a variety of ways to do that. There are certain people that do more like what's considered to be like selected realism, where it's like I take certain key elements that tell me where I am, and some of the other things are abstracted, but I want to draw certain conclusions to places and things that are very clear about placing me in a time and place, or things are suggested by what I'm seeing on stage. Because every time we talk about doing something where it's realism and we require you to set it in the same time and place, the argument is going to be, well, everybody's designs are going to all look the same. Well, I challenge every single one of you to prove those naysayers wrong. I can't imagine that we're going to get, 900 different entries that all look exactly the same just because it's set during the same time and place for everybody. Because I think different people are drawn to different things. And one of the things that I've talked about is that we really wanted to see, and this came from talking to some of our judges, specifically more so, I think, to the costuming and makeup people specifically, wanting to see a stronger connection between a designer fully understanding the role that a character is trying to play by having done in-depth character research to know exactly what that character is all about, and then fundamentally using their design to accentuate that, to punctuate that, to make it more clear and to support the actor's choices as they're going forward. Really paying attention to specific color choices or line choices, profile choices, all kinds of different things that we have access to that will tell us that we're in that time period, but that we are not just anybody in that time period. We're this very specific person that has choices in front of them that they can use and exercise, and they've selected these things. So I always used to tell my kids, you're becoming their personal shopper. What would this person have had their shopper pick out for them? It's not just like anything works because it's that period. It's that it's this specific choice. And think about it also, this particular play, there's characters from all over the world and that are included in here, and different suggestions and things. So their research can take them so many different places to find the historical accuracy. In terms of location being researched as well, our kids that are working on trying to recreate the train, they actually have access to what the original Orient Express looked like, but different people are going to see different details as standing out to them and wanting to make them more visual in terms of what they're working on. And of course, different slants. And, one of my biggest things in terms of research that I used to always find was that it's like, okay, great. I've got all this research from this time period. Guess what? It's all these black and white photos, and I've got to colorize them. I got to Ted Turner them, and I'm going to go in and I'm going to like tint them or make them the colors that they need to be. And so being able to start to look at some other ways that people have chosen colors and found information through paintings, posters, other sources that are out there, I feel like our kids get that opportunity to find all different kinds of research and creativity. And again, choosing colors, choosing patterns, what would have been available during that time. What links would this person have gone to get something that looked like that because that mattered to them? Like all of that in-depth, really rich detail and research. That's what we're trying to show off in our students this year. That's what we're trying to show off. Once they've found those incredible details, yes, they've got to go through the artistry. They're going to be going through and trying to make everything very clear to somebody who's going to be looking at their work. But a thing that kept coming back from hearing the judges as well is like getting the right stuff in front of you to look at, to recreate artistically is so important. They talked about like actually looking at fabric and seeing what it looks like and trying to draw from it and those kinds of things, having access to more things to make all of your work that much more authentic and clear by having access to it or pictures of it or things to work from. And I think that we can really help and support our kids this year with this particular prompt in that way as well. So I don't know if anybody has particular questions about the directorial prompt. It's very, very simple. It's in this time and place. It's what we've got to cover. And other than that, it's what you're choosing to do with it that works and makes it, I like to say where it's, this is the way I worded the goal. The goal is to fully transport the audience into the world of the story with rich, well-chosen detail. I'm going to throw this in here too, just because I feel like it's important. When I talk about details, there was a really good quote that was there that somebody said, like, in terms of design, you start off with, there was that movement in theater history where they tried to make, if they were going to set a play in a train, they would bring an actual train car to the stage and people would go off the stage and they would have a platform somewhere because they wanted it to be so real that the actors experiencing it were doing everything the actual way. If they were supposed to be eating, there was real food, all these kinds of things, super, super detailed, like nothing spared. It's all there. But for stage, what we're going to do is we're going to keep taking things away until we get down to those things with which, as long as they're there, I know where I am. Or as long as they're wearing that, I know what time period I'm in. You know, like this, selecting those perfect, rich details that are so clear, so precise, that tell us where we are. I think that's an important skill for kids to learn, to get down to those minimal things. It doesn't mean they can't have more detail than that that's in there, but you want those one key ones to stand out so that they really, really accomplish that goal of establishing it with as little as possible so that everything else becomes just layering and, again, just enriching, but it's got that perfect foundation. So I like this quote. I included it. The impossible cannot have happened. Therefore, the impossible must be possible in spite of appearances. I think in a show like this, anybody ever told me, it's like, oh, you're going to do a play where there's going to be a moving train on stage? I'd be like, sure I am. That's a film. You know, if you're going to do trains, man, you're going to go and do film. Well, Ken Ludwig said no. Ken Ludwig said, no, if we're going to do Agatha Christie, we're going to do this one. And it's going to be a train and it's going to be on stage. And we're going to make it moving. And we're going to, like, you know, we're going to have this, we're going to be transported on it on stage. And so in all of our wild and crazy technology world that we have now, we have access to creating things and making people feel certain ways. I think it's a fun challenge for our kids. I think to make the impossible possible, or to at least appear like it is. I think that's kind of, I think it's cool. Anyway, I digress. Okay, let's double check here. I really wanted to dig in here. Some people had some questions this past time about the costume challenge. If you haven't looked at it so far, some things that I've clarified within it this year that are a little bit different from last year is we talked in here about the justification paper, really addressing more character analysis. Now, if I'm going to be going out there and I'm going to have my kids doing character analysis, if I'm looking at this, it's like, okay, well, what character analysis form am I going to use? If you have your actors currently doing that, or Theater 1 classes that you have do character analysis for roles that you're going to play, this is a great thing for your designers to start to fill in. Like, I think that's a great exercise for them to do as they're reading, as they're going through, filling out a full-on character analysis for the characters that they're going to choose to work with. Because you're going to see as they go through here, they're not having to do all of them. I love that Ken Ludwig cut us down from 12 suspects to 8. I think it made it a little bit more concise for our kids, but they're getting to have a lot of freedom this year in terms of picking the characters. And I wanted to do that for a couple of reasons. For one, that's going to keep the variety. I'm not going to have required everybody to do the exact same ones. And so we're going to see all the copies of the same character, although we will, our lead character will be, everyone does him. But they have a lot of freedom in the other areas and the other plates that they're working on to pick ones I think that they identify with, like somebody they think is super cool, or somebody that they really have an idea for this one or that one that they are drawn to. And I think that it gives them that opportunity. So that's one of the things I tried to do with these. So their character analysis for those characters is going to become very, very important, because in that justification paper, they're going to want to refer back to that. In my analysis, I found these things to be true about this character, and these were the most important traits of this character. So, and that's what they are. And because of these, I made these choices. I had an opportunity to use this neckline or that line. This one seemed to fit more in keeping with this part of their personality. This is an homage to their home country where they're from. And it's, so it's something that they would have only found maybe in this other country.
Hey, Mike, can you turn that off?
Differently. So it's allowing them in that character analysis to be able to refer back to it to talk about their design choices. That's a little bit different than we've done in the past, because before they were trying to explain concepts. They were trying to say, I said it in this time period because of these reasons. I thought it fit. And in that context, this person would have been like this. Now we're saying the script says this. In analysis, I've determined that these are the most important things about them as a character, about them as a person, socially, emotionally, historically, whatever it might be. I've nailed this character down to this description, and I've selected these clothing items or this makeup look or everything that I'm going to be doing related to that character based on this analysis. That's where we're starting off with here. The prompt address statement, honestly, guys, I almost threw it out. But it's something that we recently added because we liked having them at state, the idea of being able to have a little piece of paper that summed up what people were about to see when they looked at your exhibit at state, where it said, in the past year, it was like, I based my inspiration on these things and this is how it's shown. In this particular 100 words, I like you to think that this is your opportunity to say, in my designs, I really wanted to bring out this, and this is how I think I did it. It's a very personal, like, it's a way for you to just connect and hit the high points of where you really think that you nailed your design for this particular show. And you put it in that statement, and that's an introduction to who you are and who your work is for them to read, if that makes sense. Let's look at the inspiration mood board, because we've had some questions about this. Almost went so far as to take this particular item out for costuming and say, let's do a bigger plate. And your rendering plate would include the historical research that you used for that character, along with their rendering and their swatches all on the same plate. Almost went so far as to do that. I felt like that would kind of get us away from our contest format a little bit too much, but keep in mind that conceptually, that's how we want the information organized. So if I'm organizing a mood board and a research collage, and I'm doing certain characters in my work, I might also want to organize my inspiration, mood board, etc., by character. I might say, okay, here's my images I used for Poirot. Here's my images I used for, this lady, that lady, your characters. I'm not going to try to pronounce them anymore today because I'm going to get tongue-tied. But that's how I've divided them up. So my research is clear. So when I'm reading the paper, I'm seeing, oh yeah, this was the character analysis. These were the images that they picked from. And oh, here in the rendering, here in what I'm looking at, yes, I can definitely see how that all came together. So you want those pieces of information to work cohesively. Now, that being said, also, if in your renderings you want to incorporate something in the notes or things along those lines, that's up to you, because I've seen artists who like in their renderings to include some of that inspiration as what's there. Some judges that we've talked to have said, no, that's not the place on the rendering. A rendering is meant to be super clear. It is meant to go to a seamstress, and a seamstress is going to use that rendering and they're going to build a costume from it. That extra stuff that's around there, they don't need it. It's in the way. So you run that risk of some judges feeling like that's not necessarily supposed to be there. I like to leave it up to you as a communicator, because as a designer, you're communicating information. And if you think it's important to see what you've included and why, and you can have a hint of that on there somewhere, you can include it on your plate. But it's not required that you do. It's important that what I see in the inspiration board or the mood board, whatever you want to call it at this point, it's important that I see what you used from there in this character's costumes. Okay, so you've got two that are renderings. You've got one that's going to be Poirot, and then you've got your choice. It should be any female character that you want to do. There's a lot of them, so pick from them. I wanted you guys to have the opportunity to do a very male look and a very female look from this time period, because I feel like that's important for you to dabble in both of them. And so you have those options for your plate 2 and 3. Plate 4 is where we had some confusion. So I definitely want to make sure that we're understanding that. What we talk about when we talk about a colored illustration format is it's a much more casual sense of drawing. Some people will still full out because they're artists. They will draw this like a full-on rendering. That's not what's intended by the category. What's intended by the category is a communication piece. I want to see like a quick storyboard moment of what these characters could look like on stage together. It's for a director to look at and say, oh yeah, if she's wearing that and he's wearing that and he's wearing that in this moment, I really see that looking like what I want that scene to look like. It's that kind of conversation that can be had. It can have a suggestion of color. It's going to have a suggestion of profile, of line, maybe some pattern or things that are on it, but it's suggested. But what's most importantly communicated in that drawing is how they work together. That this, you know, I would say, especially like, take, for example, you pick a scene because you're going to get, you're able to pick any snapshot in the play. You can pick any moment where there are at least 3 people on stage. Say you pick a scene where 3 men are on stage together. Suits during the 1930s did not necessarily take on a lot of differences for men, and yet these men are very, very, very different people from one another. So it might be really challenging to show how you've adhered to the historical accuracy and still manage to distinguish between the 3 men the important character information that separates them, that delineates them one from the other by your design choices. And I can see that in an illustration. I can see how you're relating them together or how you're setting them apart in your choices. And I think that's an important skill for our designers to have. And I think our judges want to see that information. Yes, they can do the artistic communication skills of a rendering so a seamstress can work with it. But I think they also want to see the thought process that they use in terms of putting pictures together and helping a director to visualize what those final moments can look like. Because they're blocking it, but you're decorating it. And your costumes are giving them an idea of some of the things. It's like you're like the designer for that moment. They're going to be sitting here in this dining car in that moment. What would they be wearing? It's later in the evening. They've lost, you know, like whatever it might be, you get to pick. You can pick any moment. It's like, as long as 3 or more are gathered, it's a good meeting place. You can pick that moment as a designer and go with it. So any 3 characters, and you can do more. Like all of a sudden it's like, oh, I have this one scene, but it's got 4 in it. You can do 4 if you would like to. 3 is the minimum. I think it's important for you to be able to see that. I hope that, I don't know if you guys have any questions or that. I can't see in the chat because I'm not, let's see, there may be something in the chat. Any questions? You could No questions yet about this. Okay, so we're okay on costumes, like they understand the challenge here. So in terms of evaluating this, like, is one of the things that we always like to talk about with our kids as far as evaluating it. Are we looking specifically for the best artists in the bunch? Because we always go back to this. It's always like, oh, how are you going to evaluate it? And some kids are so good at art and some kids aren't. If you're starting to hear what we're saying here in terms of the challenges, it's not going to be about who can draw the best. It's going to be about who can collect the information and assimilate it the best. And then they've got to communicate it. They've got to show it. But it's not just about who can draw the prettiest thing. Because somebody might draw an absolutely beautiful 1930s dress for a character that seems to not really be indicative of their personality at all. You know, you're putting somebody who's a very dark, foreboding character in a light pink pale dress, and it's lovely and it's beautiful. It's not a correct choice. We're evaluating choices here, and we're seeing them carried out through your artistic process. But ultimately, it's a contest about your design choices and communicating them. Yes, no, maybe so, costumes.
Rachel.
Yes.
Just to clarify, so on plate 4, we're wanting to draw those 3 characters basically like as if they were sitting in a scene on the stage, not necessarily like just 3 like croquette type, you know.
They can be, they don't have to be seen in an action shot. Like, I mean, I just gave that as an example of potentially like that's a moment that they've selected. But I want to see all 3 of them in the same plate. I don't want it to be one of those where we have a lift up and we see like, this is one, this is another, this is another picture. I want it to be where we see the 3 characters together. If they want to draw somebody sitting, they can. But they could also just as easily be like you talked about, like off of some of the outlines and figures, like your croquis or whatever that they use that they draw from. Does that make sense?
Okay,
Yeah, it doesn't have to be an action shot, but that's one of the things that people also talked about in terms of our costume renderings. And I always go back to the book that's like a character drawing for the stage. You can put them in positions. You can have them stand in certain positions that reveal things about their character. Like you can draw them in different things that I think are really helpful. So they aren't all like what I call like the paper doll look, where they're standing up straight with their arms straight down at their sides. Like they don't have to look like paper dolls. They can still look in character, but if we set them down behind the table, you wouldn't really be able to see the whole costume. So as a designer, they want to show the full costume, but what the three of them look like together. Other questions on costuming? Any of you guys that are doing this for the first time, a lot of people find costuming to be the one that they start with because it seems to be one of the easier ones for students to kind of get their heads around because they've chosen their own clothing for their lives. And so they start to realize how things reflect people. And so some of those choices come a little bit more naturally to them. And in terms of the requirements, they're pretty clear. A lot of good samples and things out there for them to improve their skills. Also minimal materials in terms of, your paper and your drawings or whatever, but we've seen some people do some really cool work on their computers as well, like even with Procreate and different things, like where kids are drawing on iPads or drawing on tablets and doing them via computer. There's all different ways to handle it, but it does seem to be one that's a good gateway into other areas of design for kids. And so if you're trying to figure out maybe a good place to start, I think this is a super one to work with. Okay, I'd like to skip ahead because the next one in the guide is actually set, but I'm going to jump down to makeup because they're very similar. When you're working with makeup, again, that same thing that we talked about in the justification paper, we want them to do the character analysis like what they did before, because we want to see that they have a full understanding of the social, emotional, physical aspects of this character that they're creating a makeup and a hair design for. And this time period is fabulous for that, guys. Like all of the facial hair options and hairstyles for men, and then all of the hairdos and things for women and their makeups and, in combination with these fabulous costume pieces that they have. There's just so much to work with. And I feel like they've got to have that good sense of character before they go shopping for all those rich details that they're going to select for the particular characters later on. And so when we get to that inspiration board or research collage, again, you're going to want to separate it out. You're going to want to be able to say by character, these are my images for this part. These are my images for this character. And these are my images for my other character, so that as a judge or somebody looking at the design, I can see your process. I can see this is who you described the characters as in your justification. You selected from these historical places and information, and I see it coming together in your renderings. And then from there, it's applied to the actual makeup, and I see the character come to full life. So we're seeing that full process go through makeup. Something to consider if you're doing this as a group project is I would probably have my kids do the same people that my costume person was doing. So if they're going to be in a group together, have your costume person and your makeup person get together and say, we're going to do Poirot because we're all required to do him, but pick the same other two characters so that the full presentation that comes together as a group, we can see how those are tied together and come together as well. Something just to consider when you're looking into those. Some things that we have that are a little bit different for makeup from other things is there's a term here that we use, it's called a product legend. And I think this is going to be really important this year because it's a contest where when you apply the actual makeup, you are able to use pre-made things. You can go online and order a mustache for Poirot that you have had, or you can build and make one. Wigs and things like that. You may have kids that are very talented and want to work and make wigs to go for these characters, or they may order one online and do some different things, or they may just have hair styled that way. The product legend becomes really important for us because it's where they communicate which things they've built and made and created and which ones they've ordered. And ultimately, that is the communication that tells a person, if I'm the actor playing this role, I need the following items in order to recreate this makeup. So it's almost like your little shopping list. These colors of makeup are the ones that I used. The rendering shows me the placement where it's all going to go. And then also in the product legend, if I've purchased any other types of things like that I've used, particularly for hair applications or things I've added to wigs, anything that I've done, if I've added on prosthetic pieces, any kind of stuff like that, that's going to be included in your product legend. Because some people are like going, I can't use that because I have to do it myself. You can use those tools. You just have to cite them. You just have to list them. This is where I got this. This is how I use this. Make sense? Because I think that that's, especially this year when we're starting to have like a lot of very detailed hair and facial stuff, that's an important thing for makeup kids to understand and work with. So that being said, the last thing that I want to point out here is on the 5, 6, on the plates where they're doing they're showing the photographs of the final makeup. All we're requiring of them is a headshot, like the headshot that shows the view. I do think sometimes a side view is helpful if they're there, if you can work with them. It's only required to have a full front shot, but we do want them to be unfiltered. I mean, there's a real temptation with our kids that they know how to make everything look way better under this light or that light or certain things. And we want these to be unfiltered so we can see the actual work of the makeup application. So it's not so much like we want to see it under lights, we want to see it somewhere else. We want to see the up close detail that comes from an unfiltered, like close-up view of the work. Makes sense there in terms of that. How are we on makeup? Hair makeup. Any questions? Let's see, looking in the chat. I don't see any questions. So if you come up with any more, let me know. Oh, who were the costume professionals who critiqued the kiddos? Pam Friday was one, Pam Fletcher Friday, Bruce, I think it's Bruce McWilliams from Texas State. He was phenomenal. A lot of fun with him. And I think we're going to try to get him to do some workshops and things a little bit for the Student Activities Conference. Then also Wilbert, gosh, I can't think of his last name off the top of my head. He actually is from Texas as well, but is currently working in New York on some big productions and stuff like that. Those were the ones that critiqued the kids on costuming. Super critiques, just look for them. And they say them specifically, I think, by category. When you go to look up the films and things that are available, I think it talks about, it says like Division 1 costume or whatever, it tells you the different ones. And so if you're like wanting to show something specific to a certain group of kids, you can sort through them that way. But just for me, I would sit down and listen to them all. I had a blast hearing all of them. I just learned so much. Okay. All right. Let's see. Any other questions right now? Okay. Like to do one question. Okay. All right. So that's what I'm seeing for those. Let's go back up and look at set real quick. Let's see that one. This is something that I love it because I may not have told any of you guys, but set is usually my favorite. I know I'm not supposed to have a favorite. I love all things design, but it's probably my favorite area to work in. And when I saw the idea of like make a moving train, I got super excited. This is like, wow, this is going to be super fun. And actually seeing, you can see trailers of the professional production where they did some cool things with it, but just hints of it enough that give you some like creative juices to start flowing and start thinking like, oh, and then for this other part that could turn around and do certain things. Playing with windows and stuff in the cars, like windows from the outside looking in and inside looking out, fun, all kinds of stuff that you can kind of play around with. I thought would be super cool. But set, I'm trying to make it something because there have been some people that have suggested our set category is very, very, very difficult because it asks you to do a lot of different skills and things within it. And so what I'm trying to do is to make sure that we're hitting those skills, but not overkill with them. And so what I've asked them to do this year is to do the one scene that appears the most. If you go through the 15 scenes of the play, a majority of them take place in the dining car. So we said, let's have everybody design the dining car. Once you've designed that, you're going to base, that's what you're going to base in set design. You have a choice of either doing full color set renderings or a set model. You can do either or. So what we're saying is for that big project that you're picking for the one where you're going to do either your full color renderings or your full scale set model, you're going to do the dining car. So I've also gone ahead and said, so for the drafted ground plan, again, you're going to do the dining car. So everybody's going to do that one view of the dining car. It's going to be drafted and done in the style so that you can show, yes, I know how to draft, and this is what it would look like for that one scene. For all the scenes the dining car takes place in. That's what it's going to look like. Because this show does have a lot of movement going through it, I didn't want to have to do a full on shift schedule and all that kind of stuff for what people were doing with everything. but I still wanted the kids to be able to have a sense of how this play could move on stage. I broke it down into a little piece. If you look at plate 3, it's going to ask them for option 1 to pick act 1, scenes 1, 2, and 3. Well, I can tell you what 1, 2, and 3 are. The 1 is the introduction. It's a flashback, kind of a cool thing where you're hearing some voices in the dark, but then Poirot comes into the scene and introduces it. We're in the restaurant scene where he's sitting and having the conversation before he gets on the train, and then the train platform. So those are 3 separate scenes that happen within a matter of like 2 pages, 3 pages, where we're going to suggest this, suggest move into this, and suggest move into this. What they're going to show me on this plate is what the set looks like for scene 1, scene 2, and then scene 3. Like, what am I going to see on stage for scene 1, scene 2, scene 3? If you guys remember back to Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, we did the storyboard where you had to do the little thumbnails. We're not making you do thumbnails of 15 scenes this year. I would get shocked for that probably. I think some of your teachers would not let me live through that. But I wanted to do like basically a storyboard for those 3 quick scenes that are going to show us how we can transition very quickly, get the illusions that we need to within those moments. Scene 5, 6, and 7, it's shifting from corridor to a radio room and then into sleeping cars kind of a thing. It's like it's a 3 view. I believe that's what it was for 5, 6, and 7, but again, within like 2 pages. So they're quick, almost transitional scenes that allow you to show how you could get from one place to the other with the action being continuous. They can pick either one, doesn't matter to me. They pick the one that they like and that they have an idea for. And that one plate, they're going to show me sketch, 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 and they can have some color. If you look at, I always like to show that this is our classic example of a concept sketch. If you look at it, it's not necessarily to scale. It suggests color, but it's real sketchy looking. We do like to include a figure so we can see for scale purposes, more or less how big this is in relation to a person. But that's what we're looking at. So we would have 3 sketches of those 3 scenes all put onto one 11 by 17. So they're going to be small. Get the idea. I think before we had to do 2 concept sketches that were 5 by 7 to fit there. In this case, with 3 of them, they might be a little smaller. But that's what we're asking you to do in those moments. I also wanted to show you very quickly up in the justification paper where I had some stuff boldened. It says it's particularly important for them to address how they believe their set will help indicate the feeling of movement and allow for smooth transitions from scene to scene. They can talk about it in the paper and they're going to have an opportunity to show it in plate 3. So that's kind of like a tag team thing that can work together. But in some cases, it may be that they also want to explain how they want to use sound, how they would like to see lighting worked into their set and helping to create those movements. Maybe they're using some projection. Whatever it might be, they can dream up the world that they want to. They may or may not be able to fully execute it yet in a model or fully execute it in a drafted ground plan, but they can speculate and create that vision in the justification paper and in the sketches that they're creating later on. So it's showing levels of process. It's showing that they're understanding a little bit more of how the play needs to flow and how it needs to work. And yet also showing those specific skills of model building, rendering, drafting. So it's the skill set and the ideas that need to be evaluated all kind of rolled into a neat package, hopefully that you guys can kind of grasp and understand. Do we have questions specifically about set? Because I know that, like I said, it's one that sometimes is a little bit trickier. Anybody got questions for set? I can't even find the chat again. I lost the chat. There's the chat. Oh no, that's not the chat. Y'all. How did I lose the chat? Oh, maybe it's down here.
There are no questions, Rachel.
Oh, there's no questions. Well, I don't even have to check it then. So, okay, good to know. Everybody understands set for sure? Really? Yay. Well, it's my favorite. Make sure and tell your kids that if they want to be Miss Gomez's favorite student, they should do set. Not really. I love all the kids, but I have a special affinity for set kiddos. All right, let's jump down then. I want to jump down quickly to marketing. because we added a super cool new thing this year, not gonna lie. If you haven't seen it yet, it's one of our lower things. Marketing hasn't changed a whole lot other than one requirement that we added this year, that we took away something different and added one. But if you look up at the initial stuff, it looks still pretty much the same. The justification paper for marketing, literally they are explaining their marketing strategy, like how they plan to promote this show. In order to do that, I think it's important that they establish, this is the play about blank. This is something that, the things that are going to sell an audience on this show are blank, and target audiences, we need to, in order to get them in, we need to do blank, 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 and blank. This is my strategy for how to do that. It's a pitch. It's like me saying, if I were your advertising company, this is the package I would push for you, because I think it will be successful in you getting the butts in the seats that you want for your show. So the kids can have a lot of free reign here to come up with a lot of different ideas. Whatever they put into the justification paper that they want to include as part of their strategy is then going to appear down in their calendar. So the calendar, when people ask me, well, what has to be on the calendar? Well, anything that you said you were going to do. So if up in the justification paper, you said you were going to do social media blasts weekly, then on my calendar, I should see, starting at wherever your calendar starts, what day of the week and where you're inserting that activity. We're going to be doing that here. We're going to be doing this here. If we're going to have an event somewhere that we're going to have a promotional event, I'm scheduling that in there. If we're going to do a photo shoot with actors in order to have a poster, anything that you are doing as a marketing person, you're plotting it out, including it in the paper and then in the calendar. I think I told people in the other session briefly, I talked about the fact that we actually had some comments from our judges this year that talked about the calendar. They kind of laughed at the idea that it's such a work of art, because some of our kids that have done these for state, they're beautiful. They're like graphic genius. They're like super colorful and very exciting to look at, a lot of fun. They tie in with all of their other graphics and everything. And the judge was like going, it looks like you could send it out to your audiences and they could just like follow right along with you because it's part of your marketing. But really for this contest and what we're asking you to do is you're laying out, it's really more like sharing your personal planner. Like this is my list of things that my office has to get done within a certain period of time. And this is how I'm going to lay them out and I'm going to present them and get that information out. So sometimes it's really more important that content that I'm laying out there and being able to trace and follow that through and make sense of it. That's the goal that you're going after. Now, can it look pretty? Absolutely. But the emphasis needs to be on the idea that it's a working in-house document and not a marketing piece going out to your public, if that makes sense to you guys. So I just thought I would pass that along. I thought that was a really interesting comment from our judges. The inspiration or mood board here, I think it's important because we are doing historical accuracy this year to know the kinds of images and things that are going to be used in your production. I think if there's some super cool scenic elements that have been selected from the train that they're going to incorporate, you might want to pull that architectural detail somewhere into your poster design. If there's a cool, this gorgeous hat for one of the characters that they've chosen for part of that costume design, and you wanted that hat to appear somewhere in your posters, like I feel like you need to have some of that historical information. You don't have to put a ton of it on there, but if it's some certain stuff from the production that you're thinking of that you want to emphasize specifically, I think that's a neat thing for you to utilize a mood or inspiration board for. But it's also a great place for you to explore maybe graphics of that time period. Maybe you want to pay homage to what graphics look like in the 1930s as well. Pay a little bit of, or maybe you want to make it more contemporary and something that's going to grab people's attention now, and we're going to get transported later. It just kind of depends on how you want to work with it. But I think this is a great place for you to explore your fonts and your color palettes, textures, and things like that, as well as key elements that you'd like to include. So that's what you're going to do on your mood board. Poster designs, folks, it's really, really important that you include all of the pertinent information. We will get that to you in the handbook as far as what the production company requires, because Concord will have a set description where they're going to tell you, like usually they'll tell you how big the author's name has to be or what wording has to be included. I thought it was going to be inside the script, and there was actually a note in the script that says if you're licensed to do this, look into your contract and it'll tell you. So I'm going to have to call and tell them, can you send me a pretend contract so I can let all of you know what that would look like. And we will include that in the handbook that comes out on September 1st. You've got our dates included in there. For those of you who have never done this contest, we always advertise the production as being from League High School. I still remember being in the gallery at State a while back, hearing people that were walking through and saying, who is this League High School? They're winning everything, because it kept saying League High School on the posters. And it was like, no, that's just our secret advertising thing. Like, we're all designing a production for that particular theater. It was meant to be a more neutral kind of a thing, but that's who we designed it for. So that's going to be your producing organization. And then we give you the dates and the times that you're going to include there. You could add ticket prices and information like that. You definitely always want to include how much the tickets are, how to get the tickets, because all of our judges always ask that. It's like, if I'm looking at this poster, I need to know, I want it to grab my attention in the first couple of seconds and make me so interested in it that I then look for how to get tickets or more information. It's super clear, and I could snap it and take it with me, and I could go and buy those tickets later. I mean, we want that to all happen in that moment. So all that information needs to be included on that poster. And it's a really important touch point for you, because that is often considered to be the first thing that people are going to see about this play. And you're setting up a lot of that. I also really, I think this particular show, this is the first time we've done like a really big whodunit, kind of a thing where it's like part of the draw is getting people to want to come in and see the mystery being solved. I mean, I always think if Agatha Christie wrote this, she wrote this in the time period that she was like, she said it in the time period that she wrote it in. So it would have been like us writing like a story today of like snapped from the headlines of crime or whatever. This is like their, I don't know, crime. It's like, what is it? I can't think of it. The one that everybody's been in, SVU, all of the, you know what I'm talking about. It's all the crime shows, but this would have been that for the time. It's like, what's going to draw us in? What's going to make us like be able to want us to go in and see how it gets solved. And so you have that charge of making it that exciting, that interesting in what you're doing. We do have a playbill on here. Some people have asked, because a couple of years ago we did the video program, the digital program. Other people have wanted to continue doing that. You can do that if you choose to. It's one of those things where, because we're going to have another thing that's going to have a link to it, you may or may not want to do that for the contest in this case, because it's being submitted digitally. At this point, it's just as easy for us to see that already up and see it in the format that it's going to be. We like to say it's what's called print ready. So I'm looking at your program and the pages that are going to be there, and I can see it. If it makes it to state, then we have the option of having that printed, and then we put it on a plate. So when people go to see the exhibit at State, they can pull your program out and open it and look at it. So that's one of the things that we talk about in terms of your programs. It always says playbill on here, but playbill is, to me, it's a standard size, and that's what they're sometimes called. But we get confused with this idea that there's this company called Playbill, and they like to, they have a whole app where you can go in and fill in and create your own programs that look like they're playbills. We are not asking you to do that. It's a program that you can create for yourself. That's, it's literally like, if you think of it, it's an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper folded in half, cover, 2 inside pages and a back page on a single piece of paper folded. That's the minimum. Like, that's what you can do. And that's what we would be looking at to be able to see. A lot of people like to include more pages, more options and things that they like to have there. In the past, we've asked you to include certain things, like if you wanted to put something in there about the history of Agatha Christie or things like that. We've had people like use the program to educate their audiences. If you want to add things like that in there, you can. There is no requirement for that this year. So sometimes what happens is people, because they did something last year, oh, well, last year we had to do it, so I'm pretty sure you still have to do it this year. Don't assume. Always go back into these challenges and say, okay, what does it say I have to do here? Because this is what we're going by this year. Last year's challenges, they were fabulous, exciting. Everybody did some really cool stuff. This is this year's. The handbook will give you some information that kind of tells you about the contest and stuff later, but this is your guideline for what you have to do for the contest. So that's what's required. 8.5 by 11 folded in half, finished size. That's all you have to have. Can be more, doesn't have to be. Could be digital, but doesn't have to be. What's new and what I want to spend a little bit of time here with is what we're calling a video commercial trailer. We initially thought of it as like, what about if we had you guys create a book trailer? Because I don't know if you guys have seen those. I know some teachers assign those sometimes for classwork. They'll have students like in an English class, like create a book trailer because it's commercial advertising a book that they're studying, because it's asking you to kind of sell somebody else on this book that you better know what it's all about before you sell it. It's kind of a fun challenge for you. We've started to see more of these created on theater websites where people will say, you know, they'll get people to go to their website or they'll post on Instagram or something like that. They'll have a quick video. It might be something as simple as a TikTok, you know, that you've created for your show to advertise it, but it's a video commercial. If you think of it that way, minimum 30 seconds, maximum 90 seconds of promoting your production. The concern that we have in this is that I haven't given you a lot of guidelines that say you have to do this, you have to do that. I don't even know what I need to require you and not require you to do at this point because it's very new. The main things I can tell you that were concerning for people when we discussed this is that the licensing companies are very particular about video reproduction of the work. So it's not like we're asking you to go out and costume a bunch of characters into like scenes from this show to create a commercial. If you look at the movie trailer, that's what you would see. You would see the actors in full action segments and things like that they would do for a movie trailer. For a play trailer, because the licensing is being so specific, in most cases, you're not allowed to have actors saying the lines from the show. You might be able to have a still photograph of something. You can have maybe somebody else doing a voiceover, like a commercial where somebody's talking about the show and telling about it while you're seeing something with no dialogue being spoken. You just kind of want to do your research and your due diligence on this to make sure you're not violating any kinds of copyright laws, I guess is what we're talking about. But we want you to have fun with it. I feel like it's a great chance to build up suspense. It's like, first time I ever did any of these, I think it's like iMovie or something that they have one. They almost have like a little template where you can create a trailer for something. And you just plug in your information and a couple of photos and they make it animate and flow through and do all of these different things. And it's like super cool. And it's like, wow, it's like a real commercial. Well, your kids know how to do this. I know they do. And TikToks and everything else that they're working with. This is the way this generation is advertising and talking about events and sharing like what's happening and drawing their peers into it is by giving them that video glimpse. And so we wanted to pay homage to that in our contest and give them that opportunity. Will there be new rules instituted after this year once we do this because we learned things we never knew we needed to know? Probably, but that's okay. We want to be branching out and we want to be doing what's best practices and what people are doing in the industry. And we want to learn and go along and grow with it. So that's why we added that. It was actually a great idea presented by another teacher. And she suggested that she thought it might be something kind of cool. And I loved it. And so we're running with it just to try it out and see how it goes. That being said, do we have any specific questions now here about marketing and specifically like maybe about the new trailer or anything like that? Oh, Law and Order, thank you. Like, what is that show? Law and Order. Yeah, Agatha Christie was writing the Law and Order of her day and time. So Ken Ludwig has just now made it a live episode for us. Breathe air into it, and it's going to be pretty awesome. Oh, here's a good question. How will the trailer be displayed at State? I think what we'll end up doing, and I may have to find out from some of our film people, I'll probably have to talk to Luis and different things. We were kind of trying to figure out if there's a way to do links to it where you upload it somewhere and it's like a QR code that somebody can go by with their phone and click on a QR code and it would view on their phone. If it's a QR code that's embedded in their entry, then the judge can open it with the QR code in the entry. Or we're also looking at the possibility when we do for the digital submission. This past year, we started doing some things. A lot of people entered in what we call just a template. We created an entry template for you that you just put your work into. It was like a Google Slides presentation, and you inserted your work in the order and put it in there and just saved that and sent it to us. If literally it may end up, if there's a way we can do it as a Google link, et cetera, we'll figure out how to submit it in that way. But the idea is that the link would be something that people would be able to click on and be able to view on their phones at State. if that makes sense. People have been talking about like, you can do like a private YouTube this and that. And again, it was one of those things where I was like, well, we're going to do it now and we'll figure it out as we go. We'll learn, we'll figure it out and we'll make sure it gets done. Because otherwise, if we waited until we could figure out it gets done, it might never get done. So we're running with it. Other questions, marketing specifically? Crickets, 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 what? Actually, if you got, if we don't have a lot of questions, if you guys have things that you'd like to comment or things like that as well, you can comment in chat. We talked about the fact that right now we're kind of in previews. You guys are the first ones seeing the prompt today. So if there's clarifications that you think would be helpful, other information that I haven't thought of that could be included here, any suggestions that you have for that, this is a great opportunity to do it so that I can tweak this before we post it on the website. And you could be responsible for being part of the creative team that made all of this happen. So if you have any suggestions that go along with that, areas that can maybe be a little bit more clear.
Rachel, we have another session for you at 2 o'clock. So this would be a good time to go ahead and put a pause. Everyone can go take a break, grab
Okay,
a snack,
sure.
and come back at 2 o'clock for your third session.
That sounds good. Somebody did just say,
Okay.
guys, and this is something fun, that this is a neat way to also draw on your kids that might want to do film. So that can also maybe help you with the commercials and things like that. So that would be super cool.
Okay. All righty. So then I guess we will see everyone at 2 o'clock. Okay.
Okay.
Is that good? All right. See you guys back at 2 o'clock. Bye-bye.
Awesome.